Boys and girls, welcome to another lesson of Science with Miss Salter. Today we are talking about classification in our structure and function unit. So we'll be talking about classifying animals in different ways. But before we get into that, I wanted to do a review with you guys about what we talked about last week. So last week we were talking about adaptations of animals, and we were talking about physical and behavioral adaptations. So physical adaptations are physical features on the body of the organism. So like, what kind of teeth does it have? Does it have thick fur? Can it mimic something else? Warning colors, webbed feet, sharp claws, large ears, all those things. The other type of adaptations that we talked about were behavioral adaptations. These are things that the organisms do to survive. So do they migrate or hibernate, collect food or store food for the winter? Do they play dead? Do they group? Are they nocturnal? And some of these behavioral adaptations are either learned or they're instinctual that they're born with. So I would like you to keep practicing at home with your structure and function cards. Keep practicing different ways. Try to do that at least once a week. It'll help you out when we have a review at the end. So just a quick review here. So what type of adaptation is this? Of course, camouflage. That sea dragon is hiding there really well. This type of camouflage, of course, being in a herd. So their coloring causes confusion and it's hard to identify just a single animal from the herd. All right, another type of adaptation is strong odor defense. So think of like a skunk spraying something really nasty at you. Our next one we're talking about is mimicry. So a coral snake versus a king snake. Coral snake, very venomous. King snake, not venomous, but their colors are similar enough where it's confusing to the animal. Another type of adaptation, a behavioral adaptation, is migration. So birds, whales, butterflies, all different animals migrate to survive, seeking those warmer temperatures during the winter. All right, so getting into our learning goal today, for our lesson that we're going to be focusing on with classification, your learning goal is I can classify or group objects, animals, or plants according to their characteristics. And today we're going to focus on classifying animals. So first of all, what is classification, or what does it mean to classify something? So it just means putting objects into groups based on their characteristics or similarities. So here I just have some little foam stickers that I got from my boys. You can see it's a big jumbled mess. But I bet you can look at those and think of a way to group them. So take a second, look at all those stickers and think, how would you group those or how would you classify those based on similar characteristics? Okay, so when you're classifying things, you want to classify them based on similar characteristics. Everything in that group must follow the rule. So for this classification, I took all my shapes, and can you figure out the rule? Yeah, I sorted them by the same shape. So we have squares, rectangles, circles, and triangles. So just putting them all together that way. Can you think of another way to classify these same stickers, but in a different way? Yeah, if you said color, the rule here is sort things by color. So we have green, blue, red, purple, orange, yellow, just putting them in different groups of color. So why do we classify things? We want to organize things, make it easy to see, easy to understand. We want to put things that are the same together. But when you're classifying, you want to find a rule that works. So would it make sense if I classified these based on size? Let's say, no, not really, because they're all a similar size. The rule has to work in order to separate everything into, at least two different groups. Would it make sense if I wanted to classify these stickers into living versus non-living? No, right? They're all non-living things. So that wouldn't make sense. So when you're thinking of classifying, you need to think of a rule that will work for the objects that you have or the things that you're looking at. So today we are going to be talking about classifying animals of the world. So think of all the animals in the world. How would you group them or how would you classify them? This is a question that scientists were asking as they started discovering new types of animals and documenting them. How would you classify those? All right. So while you're thinking about that, there was a video that you're supposed to watch before this lesson. If you have not watched it already, that's okay. We're going to watch it together now. If you have already watched it, this would be a great review. You can watch it with us. All right, so now we're gonna watch that video about animal classification and how all the animals of the world are grouped. And this is a way that scientists have generally agreed upon. And this video is almost 7 minutes. And it's a great review if you've already seen it, and if you haven't seen it, get ready.
Of many different types of animals. Some swim, some fly, some breathe air, and some breathe underwater. Some have skeletons, and others don't. To help us understand the differences between the animals in our world, scientists classify or sort animals into different groups that share important characteristics. The two largest groups of animals are vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates are animals that have spines or backbones. Invertebrates are animals that do not have backbones. Most of the animals in the world are invertebrates. Some examples of invertebrates are octopus and squid, insects, arachnids, starfish and sea urchins, jellyfish, crabs and lobsters, clams, and many more creatures. On land, most invertebrates are fairly small, but in the water, they may grow to much larger sizes, as the water will support them even without a skeleton. Vertebrates make up less than 5% of all animal species on Earth, but if I asked you to think of an animal, you would probably choose a vertebrate. Vertebrates are divided into different classes or groups. Several of these classes are specific types of fish. For example, jawless fish, like lampreys and hagfish, and cartilaginous fish, like sharks and rays. For simplicity's sake, these other classes are usually lumped together with bony fish and just called fish. The four remaining classes of vertebrates will all be very familiar: amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Let's look at the characteristics that make an animal a fish. Fish live in the water, and they can breathe underwater. They use gills, not lungs, to get oxygen from the water around them. Fish have scales and fins. They are cold-blooded, which means that they cannot control their own body temperature, which changes based on the temperature of the environment around them. Most fish also lay eggs. Amphibians are a group of animals that include frogs, toads, newts, salamanders, and more. Amphibians, like fish, are cold-blooded. Unlike fish, amphibians can live on land and in the water, and have smooth, moist skin. Amphibians lay their delicate jelly-covered eggs in the water. When the eggs hatch, the young may not look much like their parents, because some amphibians must go through metamorphosis, or a big change, to become adults. Aside from some fish, amphibians are the only vertebrates that undergo metamorphosis. Reptiles you might know are turtles, snakes, crocodiles, and lizards. Like fish and amphibians, reptiles are cold-blooded. Unlike them, reptiles are air-breathing animals and cannot breathe underwater. Even reptiles that live in the water must come to the surface to breathe. You can tell if an animal is a reptile instead of an amphibian if it has dry, scaly skin. Most reptiles lay eggs, but they are very different from the eggs of amphibians or fish. Their eggs are laid out of the water and have a protective shell. For the most part, reptile eggs have soft, leathery shells. Birds are easy to recognize. They are the only type of animals in the world to have feathers. Like reptiles, birds can only breathe air. All birds have 2 legs, and all birds also have wings, but not all birds fly. Unlike fish, amphibians, and reptiles, birds are warm-blooded. That means that they can maintain a constant body temperature. Birds lay eggs, but unlike the eggs of reptiles, birds' eggs have hard shells. The last group of animals we are going to talk about is mammals. Mammals are the group of animals that humans belong to. Like birds, mammals are warm-blooded and breathe air. Even mammals that live in water must come to the surface to breathe. All mammals have at least some fur or hair, although some have less than others. Almost all mammals give birth to live young instead of laying eggs, and all mammals feed their babies milk. A fun fact about mammals is that mammals are the only animals to have ears that stick out. The animal kingdom is classified into many different groups based on animal characteristics to help us understand the world around us. Saying an animal is an invertebrate, a vertebrate, a fish, amphibian, reptile, bird, or mammal tells us many things about it that can help us to understand its needs and behavior. I hope you enjoyed learning about animal classification today. Goodbye till next time.
All right, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that video. We are going to get into it just a little bit more and look at the way that animals all across the world are classified. So how are these 2 groups of animals classified? Take a look and see if you can figure it out. Okay. All right, if you said vertebrates and invertebrates, you are correct. So vertebrates, like the video said, just means that it has a backbone. So if you're asking yourself, does it have a backbone or not, you're on the right track. So this is a skeleton of a dog, and when we're talking about the backbone, we're talking about the vertebrae back here. Same thing with fish. They have a vertebrae, that spine that goes right through the middle of their back. If you reach around, you can feel your own spine going up and down your back. However, when we're talking about insects or certain types of animals that live in the water, certain types of different creatures, there's animals that don't have a backbone. Those are considered invertebrates. So these groups, like we said, animals with backbones are vertebrates, like fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians, mammals. Invertebrates, animals with no backbones, protozoa, annelids, mollusks, lots of other ones, crustaceans, arachnids, insects, echinoderms, all different types of things there, like starfish in that category right there. All right, so invertebrates, when you probably think of an animal, you probably don't think of an invertebrate, right? That's probably not the first animal that comes to mind. But invertebrates make up the majority of animals in the world. So most of animals in the world are invertebrates. More than 90% of all living animal species are invertebrates. They're found all over the world. They include animals such as sea stars, sea urchins, earthworms, sponges, jellyfish, lobsters, crabs, insects, spiders, snails, clams, squids. All of those are in the invertebrate category. Picture a jellyfish in your head, right? They definitely don't have a backbone. Even a little squishy worm, right? He doesn't have a backbone. You might be thinking insects or arachnids, even crawfish, clams. They have a harder outer body. Does anyone remember what that's called? If you said exoskeleton, you are correct, right? So exo meaning on the outside, exoskeleton, skeleton on the outside. All right, vertebrates is the group that we're gonna get into a little bit more. So vertebrates, animals with backbones, are classified into 5 different subcategories. So today's all about classifying. We talked about putting them into just 2 groups, vertebrates, invertebrates. Now within each of those groups, we're gonna go a little deeper. So for vertebrates, they can be grouped into fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. And then even within each of those groups, you can break them down into more specific categories, right? Different types of fish, different types of amphibians, different types of reptiles, birds, mammals. Like for example, with mammals, you might break them into different groups of like dogs, cats, cows, all different things. And then even in each of those categories, you can break them down more. So it's all about classifying, organizing, and finding ways that make it easy to understand and identify different types of animals. So getting into our 5 categories of vertebrates, we're going to start with fish. So fish, including sharks, make up the largest group of vertebrates. So all the backbone animals, fish are the largest group. They are cold-blooded or ectothermic. That's the scientific name for cold-blooded. They live in the water, of course. They breathe through gills. Fish have fins to help them swim. They have scales on their body. And most fish lay jelly-like eggs in the water to make those fish babies, right? We've talked about adaptations for a while now. It's all about surviving. So these animals are surviving, reproducing, making young through those jelly-like eggs, of course, laid in the water. Our next category is amphibians, which are made of frogs, toads, and salamanders. Newts are actually a type of salamander, but sometimes people like to just say frogs, toads, salamanders, and newts, but newts, salamanders, same category. Amphibians are all cold-blooded, or what's that scientific word? Ectothermic. The name amphibian actually means double life, which is kind of a little fun fact there. Double life meaning amphibians all start their life in the water. Their eggs are laid in the water. They hatch out of their eggs and then they start living in the water, and then they eventually move on to land. You're probably pretty familiar with frogs. They start off as eggs laid in the water, then a little tadpole comes out. The tadpole starts changing or undergoing metamorphosis, and then eventually they live on land. Amphibians, most of them lay jelly-like eggs, which makes sense, right? They start their life in water, so their eggs are going to be kind of jelly-like. And they do not have scales. So kind of interesting, amphibians get most of their oxygen through their skin. They're breathing with lungs, but most of their oxygen is coming in through their skin. The next category is reptiles, and some of you guys have shared your reptile pets with me, which have been pretty cool to see. Reptiles include snakes, lizards, turtles, and alligators. Reptiles, of course, are cold-blooded or ectothermic. They breathe air through their lungs. Of course, reptiles have that scaly skin. They spend their whole life cycle on land. So that doesn't mean that they can't go into the water, because of course, like an alligator, a crocodile, a turtle, even a snake, right? They can swim in the water, but their life is their land animals. They lay soft, leathery eggs to keep them from drying out. So I can already hear some of you guys probably saying, wait, Miss Salter, I've heard some snakes can lay live, have live babies. So that's kind of true. There's some snakes that when they have their babies, their little snake babies come out in a soft, leathery egg that's kind of clear. So you can see them. Then they have a little egg tooth. They can break out of it. It's almost like a sac. They can break out of that sac and then just kind of slither on. But in general, reptiles lay soft, leathery eggs, keep them from drying out. You've probably seen turtles. They dig a hole, lay their eggs in the sand on the beach. Really, really interesting with reptiles. All right, moving on to birds. Birds are warm-blooded, or the scientific name for warm-blooded is endothermic. Different than ectothermic, cold-blooded. Warm-blooded is endothermic. Birds can survive in a lot of different climates. They're found all over the world. They can live on the land, in the water, of course, in the air. All birds have feathers, and their feet are covered in scales. Scientists generally believe that birds evolved from reptiles. The same thing that makes up a reptile's bumpy, rough skin is the same thing that makes up bird feathers. So kind of interesting there. Birds breathe with lungs. Of course, they do not breathe with gills or through their skin. Birds have lightweight, hollow bones, which of course help them fly. They have really, really strong chest bones to help work those wings to help them fly as well. And then birds, typical, the hard-shelled egg that you probably think of. So our final group is mammals, like whales, furry animals, or people even are considered mammals. Mammals are all warm-blooded or endothermic. They have fur or hair at some point in their life cycle. And yes, even whales and dolphins, they're considered mammals. They do have a little bit of hair on them, keeping them in that mammal category. They give birth to live young, but the most defining thing for a mammal is that when they have a baby, the baby is going to drink milk from their mother. The name mammal actually comes from the special mammary glands that only mammals have to produce milk. It's kind of another little fun fact there. Can you think of other ways to classify? So thinking of all the animals in the world, what other ways would you group them, or could you think of grouping them? You could keep it simple. Can you group them into animals that live on land versus animals that live on water? That would be two simple groups to put them into. You could group them based on if they have fur, fins, or scales. Maybe you just want to group them based on the number of legs they have. Do they have 4 legs, 2 legs, no legs? What other ways can you think of to classify animals of the world? Good, I can tell you guys are thinking like a scientist still. Love it. So your assignment for this week is your student booklet, page 39, Rules of Classification. And it looks like this right down here. It says there is a rule for each group. Everything in the group must follow the rule. Everything must be in a group. Everything can be in only one group. So you can't split something between 2 different groups. And I know this says everything must be in a group, but for our practice today, you're going to use your page of animal and plant cards, and I would like you to start practice classifying them based on different ways that you can think of. So maybe you want to start, and some of you guys have already turned in this assignment, and you've grouped them into plants and animals. Now, I do have to say this is a little tricky because, there are some plant and animal cards here, but you see this little red mushroom right here? Mushrooms actually for a long time were in the plant category, but then scientists looking a little further at them, and as technologies evolved, we're able to look at things closer, look at them differently. Mushrooms are actually in their own category. Does anyone know? If you said fungus or fungi, you are correct. So a mushroom is in the fungus category, not the plant category, actually. If you've already turned it in and you put the mushroom in the plant category, that's okay. But I just wanted you guys to kind of know that about mushrooms is kind of tricky. So when I would like you to practice classifying these in different ways. Maybe you want to classify them, land animals versus animals that live in the water. Just looking at the animal cards. Maybe you want to look at the different types of plants and classify them in different ways, trees versus flowers, however you can think of. Maybe you want to look at just some of the animal cards and then classify them that way. 2 legs versus like a butterfly here has 6 legs, right? So it makes them an insect. Maybe you want to classify them based on animals with fur, animals with no fur. Just practice classifying in different ways. You could even classify them, just take a few cards, classify them, and then challenge someone in your house. Hey, I've put these into 2 or 3 groups. Can you figure out how I classified them? And see if they can figure it out. But I want you to take some time and practice classifying. Once you've done it at least 3 different ways, using either some or all of the cards. I'd like you to choose your favorite way and then glue them down on this page right here. And that's what I'd like you to turn in. So whatever you're going to turn in, it does not have to use all of the cards. It can just be with some of them. But whatever you do, I'd like you to label them. Of course, in science, we always have to have labels. So tell me how you classified them. What was your rule for each group? And then have your parents take a picture, scan it, send it on in to me, and you'll get credit for this assignment. So that is it for this week. That's our work. Just work on this classifying assignment. Looking into next week, we're going to revisit adaptations. There's a video you can watch, student booklet, page 40, we'll get into that. And there's an optional virtual field trip for next week's assignment. So I hope you guys are doing good, staying safe, having fun at home. Sure do miss you guys, and I hope you're just doing as best you can. And I cannot wait to talk to you guys again soon. So take care. Bye.